Starting with the basic principle that an inclusive workplace is an effective workplace, we've been looking at how success or failure in establishing good working relationships reflect the presence of inclusive practices or the lack of them. We have had the opportunity to monitor how these working relationships take shape quite closely and gauge whether anything we are doing is helping to improve these relationships, since we are coaching and supporting both our interns and their mentors in our program. We have seen how our mentor training have helped the mentors to clarify and refine their approach to advising, training, and supervising new trainees in order to build and retain a diverse, engaged, and healthy team. We see our interns who otherwise might not thrive in their internships learn how to recognize inclusive work practices and learn how to manage up to foster more of these inclusive practices when they're not there. This workshop is our attempt to expand what we have seen in the bioscience research setting into other workplace settings where individuals are working with entry-level new trainees. Workplace culture is ever evolving and dynamic, and the conditions that lead to a more inclusive workplace versus a less inclusive workplace are often hard to discern. We want to differentiate two different informing characteristics of workplace culture. Generally speaking, both are present and both play a role in establishing and maintaining workplace culture, but one tends to lead to a less inclusive workplace while the other encourages a more inclusive workplace. What we are identifying as an ethos of conformity, we see this tending to create a non-inclusive workplace for our community college students over time by favoring imitative learning that tends to perpetuate the status quo. On the other hand, what we are identifying as an ethos of collaboration, we see this tending to create a more inclusive workplace for our community college students by encouraging greater communication, emphasizing teamwork, and accommodating different perspectives. So let me explain further. In a workplace that favors an ethos of conformity, we see the drive to fit in and fall in line. We see knowledge transfer, how new employees learn what they need to do, relies heavily on imitative learning. Communication is overly expedient. Tacit knowledge, what seems obvious to people who have been working on the project for some time, is never spelled out. And unspoken cues and prompts are often hard for newcomers to read. Next slide. The ethos of conformity relies heavily on imitative learning. Although imitative learning is an important mode of social learning, there are several disadvantages. Sometimes those who have learned through imitation have trouble explaining the process they are helping to carry out, why they are taking the steps they are taking. And this makes it difficult to critically assess the process and refine it as needed. And when something doesn't work as expected, when something goes awry, it might be harder to troubleshoot and resolve the problem for people who just understand the process superficially because their own critical thinking and judgment has not been as actively engaged throughout the learning process. The ethos of conformity tends to promote a fake it till you make it mentality, which can end up alienating and excluding those whose background and experience hasn't prepared them to readily grasp what they're supposed to do. In contrast, in a workplace that favors an ethos of collaboration, we see a greater emphasis on the following: more explicit communication, shared responsibilities for achieving goals, mapping out different steps to get things done, making sure all team members understand the process, and understanding workflow issues, how one's work impacts others. This emphasis on teamwork and sharing the responsibility for achieving goals is maintained through more explicit communication and mapping out the process well enough that each team member can see more clearly how they can contribute to the work at hand. How does an ethos of collaboration work for our students? We see the emphasis on teamwork and communication is more conducive to building better working relationships. Our interns tend to have, our student employees tend to have better understanding of the whole process, why they are doing what they are doing. This allows for students to develop better critical thinking and judgment relative to the project. This inspires greater confidence on the part of the supervisor and the student's ability to work independently and take on more responsibility. Our tenets of inclusivity align with this push to create a stronger ethos of collaboration. These tenets include fostering a workplace which promotes the following characteristics: being authentic and valued. Rather than emphasizing conformity and downplaying differences, each person's unique experience and authentic perspective is valued and incorporated into the workplace. Being transparent and accountable. Greater transparency is achieved by making goals and expectations more explicit for all tasks and responsibility. Everyone is accountable for ensuring that these goals and expectations are articulated as clearly as possible and understood by all involved for optimal collaboration. And being psychologically safe and trustworthy. Actively creating a safe space where any issues or differences of opinion are addressed in a fair and equitable way, welcoming and encouraging all participants to contribute their experience and perspective. In thinking about how we would share insights we gained from working with UCSF internship mentors and CCSF interns, we wanted to talk with CCSF supervisors and student employees to see what their concerns and issues might be and how elements of our training might work with these audiences. With the students, we were impressed with how thoughtful they were about what they were getting out of these work experiences. They did express a few concerns. Many wanted more feedback. They were not sure whether they were doing a good job or meeting expectations. Many noted that they had few resources to reference when they were on their own with questions. Since they had minimal contact with others in their position, they had few opportunities to problem solve with each other or share suggestions for improving things. From the supervisors, we heard a lot about how they wanted to make the job work for their student employees. They wanted to make sure the job was flexible to fit their students' busy schedule. They wanted to be sure that the work experience would build worthwhile job skills. One thing that was notable, not so much a complaint, but many of the supervisors talked about working in isolation, not knowing much about how others were working with student employees, whether their approach was similar or different, whether they could be learning things from their colleagues' approach.